have to say, 40 years down the road here, 40 years, and they still make stuff up. They still provide alternative facts about what happened back then. I didn't say one negative word to George Lynch, ever. All I did was express my admiration and enthusiasm for his guitar playing, right from rehearsals on. I mean, I think he's one of the great guitar players ever. He's in the top 10. I think Guitar World said they put him at number 47. That's baloney. He's a brilliant guitar player and a total guitar aficionado. He knows a lot about guitars. He's a guitar guy. But he said to you, oh, Werman, he doesn't know anything about guitars. You know, he doesn't play the guitar. Completely wrong. I taught myself how to play the guitar when I was 14. I had a folk band in high school. I had a very successful band in college. We played all over the Northeast. We played colleges. We played private parties. I turned down an audition with Brian Epstein, the Beatles manager, because we would have been drafted. But I played guitar. I played pretty good guitar. And then apparently George feels that the fact that I worked with Ted Nugent, Mick Mars, the three guys in Molly Hatchet, Rick Nielsen, and a guy named Jeff Beck. I guess he doesn't feel that I don't qualify for knowing enough about the guitar. It's pretty amazing. He doesn't apparently, well, he didn't know at that time that I worked with Jeff Beck, that I was executive producer for the Jan Hammer live album. And I took Jeff Beck into Alan Toussaint's studio in New Orleans, me in the control room and Jeff in the studio, and I fixed, and Jeff fixed with my help, all of the tracks that were that wound up on that album, that live album. And it's just, okay, Jeff, play along. I'll get you in and out. I'll go in to record and I'll get you out of record on an analog machine. And so I'll do this and you won't hear the edits. You won't hear them where I went in and out. That's not easy. But George, he didn't know that. And he also said everyone in the band felt the same way he did. Not true. Just bullshit. I had a very good relationship with Don Dokken. I had a very good relationship with Jeff Pilson. I hired Jeff Pilson years later because we got along and he was a very good negotiator and level-headed guy, kind of a team captain. And I needed him when I did the Rockstar movie with Jason Bonham, who was not easy. He once said to me, you know, about his bad behavior, I have a reputation to live up to. His father was John Bonham.
Of course.
So when
And Zakk Wylde was on that as well, correct?
Yeah, and they didn't get along. So Jeff was really valuable to me then.
Who didn't get along? Zakk and
Jason. One night, Jason came in the studio in the control room, and he was fairly inebriated, and he kissed Zakk, I think on the cheek or whatever, and Zakk freaked, and he actually picked Jason Bonham up and threw him on the couch. And, you know, Jason, I mean, we're talking 200 pounds here. Zakk was a beast.
Yeah,
he was an amazing guitar player, too. I mean, I'm sure George has some kind of admiration, I would think, for Zakk, just like he did for Randy Rhoads. You and I have gone through this previously, my whining about or expressing disbelief about these rock stars. They love you at the time, and then later on, you sucked. You didn't do this, you didn't do that. I mean, I worked with guitar-driven bands and made 23 platinum and gold albums, and he says, I didn't know what I was doing. Boy, was I lucky. I must have been really fortunate to bumble my way through all those albums and still make them hits. They all think that they're better than what I helped them be on their records. George, I don't know if he was aware of this or not, but the engineer on that session was Jeff Workman, who had been on Shout at the Devils session 2. And I did Twisted Sister with him also. And then I fired his ass because I found out that he would pick the strong guy in the group And he would quietly tell him that I didn't know anything and that he was doing everything to save the record from my incompetence. And he actually recorded my voice in the control room for hours and then took it home and edited, like Tucker Carlson did with January 6th. He edited a new conversation and he played it for them. And everything about it was obviously negative.
That was on this album too, Tooth and Nail?
Yes, it was on Tooth and Nail. And that's why George, I think, lost it when I said, this is good, what you're playing, but it doesn't take me anywhere. And I remember what I said. I said, the Tooth and Nail solo, which I've said publicly is one of the very finest solos I've ever heard in my life.
Incredible.
I said that was melodic, it had a theme, and it started off at point A and took you all the way to point B. And it was developed and shaped. And right now, it just sounds like you're playing fast and noodling. Can you maybe develop something more melodic for this song? I don't remember if he threw his guitar on the floor or he just put it down, but he flipped out. And I invited him to come in and hit me if he wanted. And he declined. So that's when I walked, because between George and me and George and Don, it wasn't easy to create a positive vibe in the studio for creating music. So by that point, I said, well, I think I'll walk. Let's let somebody else finish this album. It's not fun for me. Most of the recording had been done by the time I left. And I think Michael Wagner did a great job finishing, mixing. And Roy Thomas Baker was in there too, because he worked for the label at that time. I mean, I had left Elektra because the president of the label really wouldn't let me be the head of A&R. He thought he was the head of A&R, and he didn't really respect my opinion or taste or whatever. And he wanted to drop Motley Crue as soon as he became the president of the label. And I said, this isn't a good idea. Somebody's got to pay the bills. I respect what you value. I respect your opinion, which was more jazz and alternative. But Motley Crue, they'll be a winner. They'll pay the bills. And then when Shout at the Devil came out, he couldn't drop them because it would have been stupid. Anyway, he hired Roy Thomas Baker after I left, and Roy supervised the finishing of Tooth and Nail. So that's really it. I do know about guitars. I know how to play the guitar. I know my way around the guitar. Not like George Lynch, but the stuff he said to you, pure fiction, just wrong. Just, I emailed you and I said, damn it, here we go again. It's a personality flaw with me, or a character flaw, but I just can't let this go unanswered. Maybe it's because I was bullied pretty badly in elementary school. But you can't just make stuff up, which seems to be okay these days. Everybody makes stuff up. I mean, George Lynch is sounding like George Santos. I don't get it. I don't know why they do it. Probably just dissatisfied with what they achieved and anxious to blame it on somebody else. So,
well, I didn't. Sure. Yeah, I didn't send it to you just because I thought, well, how did you find it? Did it just pop up?
I don't know. I was online and I was on a rock and roll site of some kind. And one thing leads to another, and you see something and you click on it, and then
it brought you to the video.
Yeah, I said George Lynch. On Tom Werman or on I don't know what, but I'll always be, if I see a piece on somebody I knew or worked with in the studio, I'm interested in reading it.
With Dokken, I know they recorded separately. Do you remember anything about that? How the band came in during the day or something, and then Don came in at night?
Well, I'm sure that happened. I don't remember it exactly, but I do know that Don favored ballads. He liked singing ballads, and George simply wanted to shred, which he did very well. He liked rock and roll, hard rock and roll, and Don was more mellow.
Yeah, and they hated each other. It's well known that they couldn't stand each other. Never recorded together. I've interviewed Don twice, and both times he said it started on tooth and nail, like they couldn't stand to be in the studio together, and it went through the entire career. So the next couple of albums until they broke up, and the breakup was essentially because he was like, let's get rid of George. I just can't do it. He's like, I'm about to have a nervous breakdown. I will also say that when I interviewed Don, he confirmed your side and said that you did a great job, and that he goes, I don't know what was going on with George at the time, and I think even called him a brat. Confirmed also the story that they were fucking with you with the tape and recording you and then slicing it up and having it say like you saying things that you didn't say.
Exactly, and I was completely oblivious to this. I had no idea. And I didn't have an idea until well after I had left. I don't remember who told me or how I did find out. But
Tooth and Nail was the last album you worked with Jeff on?
Oh, no. Twisted Sister came after that. And he did the same thing apparently with Nikki Sixx and with George or Don and with Dee Snider. Werman doesn't know anything. I'm doing everything. I'm saving this album. That was his whole thing.
Except Motley Crue.
And I fired him. After Tooth and Nail. After Stay Hungry. And the guy, he had borrowed $5,000 from me and left town, moved to some other state, still owing me the $5,000. And he was just a bad guy.
At what point was that? You've told me that before, that he borrowed the money. When was that? Was that like late 80s or was that?
Whenever Twisted Sister came out, 86 or 7 maybe.
84 is Stay Hungry.
Okay. Well, then that was it. Well, maybe I did. Well, I know I did Shout before Dokken.
Shout was 83, and Dokken and Stay Hungry are the same year, 84.
Okay. Well, and then I'd had enough of him. I realized what was going on, and I got Duane Barron. It was great, fantastic.
But he borrowed the $5,000 though before you fired him?
Yes. Either that or I said, I'm not going to use you on the next album. And he said, well, can you stake me? I need money for right now. And I had done 3 albums with him, but he had a compulsion. He had a sickness. He was devious, duplicitous, and bad.
Well, what I hear too is he's like he would stay up drinking and doing coke like 24 hours. They said, Don said he would stay up all night mixing and doing shit.
Yeah, well, he when we were doing Shout, at Cherokee, he stipulated that the runners in the studio, they brought in this big gulp-sized glass and filled it with Jack and Coke, and he would start drinking that as soon as he got to work. I didn't care. He was good. I don't care what you do. You could freebase if you make a good record. That's your business. So I kept him on, and he was a good engineer. Listen to those records. And anyway,
he's badass. Yeah, he was a badass. I wonder how much would he get paid? Do you know? Like for an album?
They worked by the hour in those days. I think they probably made $30,000 to $40,000 an album. Around maybe around that, and then that was in the 70s and 80s. Decent money.
Yeah, way more than I thought. But no points or anything on the album, right?
No. Sometimes some real tight, very successful producer-engineer pairs, I'm sure, were like pro golfers and their caddies, because you depend on your engineer big time, and you cut him in. I gave Duane points, not a lot. But we made a deal, and so he got paid. I paid Duane on 6 or 7 records for years and years and years, like 30 years. I recently sold my royalties. When I paid Duane as a lump sum. But yeah, they participated after a certain number of successes with the same guy. You feel that rightfully that you owe them, because without them, the album wouldn't have been as good as it was.